clergy
was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? See, I finally got a slightly improved views on the news intro for you. I knew I could do it, but it's not that classy, is it? I'm sorry. You'll have to put up with it in the meantime. Anyway, we have our regular panelist from Manhattan, David Orenstein. Welcome, hello. David. Thank you for coming. We have a previous panelist in the form of Bryce Cornell, who's been on the show before but has taken a break for a while. He's in Philadelphia currently. Welcome, Bryce. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we have Guy Otten, another old hand who's in the Manchester area. Welcome, Guy. Thank you for coming. Okay, guys. So what have we got to report on this week? Well, it's mostly Israel, I'm afraid. The Israeli military has accused the Palestinian militant group Hamas of firing rockets from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. 34 rockets, most of them were intercepted. They've got this dome thing, haven't they? But 5 hit Israeli territory, causing damage to buildings. 1 man was lightly wounded by shrapnel. Hamas have said, we've got no information about who fired the missiles, although the attack was the biggest single barrage from Lebanon in 17 years. What do you think about that, guys? Bryce, you've got some military expertise. Let's hear from you.
So I think you were referring to, I think they called it the Iron Dome, but the Israeli missile defense system, where they're shooting incoming missiles with incoming rockets with their targeted missile systems. It's very effective. It sounds like there weren't any real casualties. One guy got shrapnel, so that's good to know that it's an effective system. As far as the who's telling the truth there, Hamas probably did do it. I don't know the competency level of Hamas leadership and whether it's possible for something like that to happen in their ranks without them knowing. Maybe it is possible. Maybe they're just incompetent. But it seems likely, like it's the Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is the best one. They've done it before. They have the capability. They have motive. It was probably them, right?
And these are not sort of domestically available, are they? These rockets, they're military gear.
Well, and especially if it's coming from the direction of the Gaza Strip. I mean, who else would it be? Logically, you know. So I think that's probably what happened, and it's good that nobody got hurt. But that's, I don't know.
Well, we don't know that nobody got hurt, Bryce, because we don't. The Israeli response is very likely to have killed people. And what strikes is 2 things struck me about this. Firstly, we've just had the 25th anniversary celebrations of the Good Friday Peace Agreement in Northern Ireland. That was an intractable dispute that went back centuries. And I just feel that we need something of that order in Israel and Palestine. And the second thing that struck me was that the coverage on the British news media focused entirely on the effect on Israel. We didn't get to hear of the effect on the Lebanese people or the Palestinian people who were, suffering under A, the barrage, and B, the Hamas kind of control. So I feel as if the reporting is biased, and the desperate need for a much more thoroughgoing peace settlement than was attempted in the past is required here.
Yeah.
And I suspect personally that the two-state solution is never going to work. I think it's got to be one state, and a state where Palestinians and Israelis have equal rights. And I don't know how we're going to get there, but that's my kind of instinct here.
It was difficult to solve the Ireland problem, wasn't it? And we've ended up with effectively a two-state solution there. But it required the president of America, the president of Southern Ireland era, and the leaders of the UK to get involved in some sort of desperate negotiation. David, have you got anything to bring to this as a
anthropologist?
Well, I was thinking of a secular Jew.
Well, I don't want to fall into the trope of just because I happen to be born of Jewish parents that I have an allegiance to a country outside of my own, because frankly, I don't. When I think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I think about it in the old terms, as I think I said on the show before, like the Hatfield and the McCoys. I mean, you can go back to 1948, you can go back to 1897, you can go back to incidences to 1892, and probably 100 or 200 and 300 years before that as well, of who hit who first. And when you've got groups of people who are Bedouins who are each claiming equal responsibility and right to land, mix in religion and mix in geopolitics, and you have this confluence of lack of willingness to bring to, there's money to be made in the war keeping on. And it's, from people who are selling arms for a lot of different reasons on both sides. And so, I think the difference between what happened in Ireland is that, I think you had people who, might have been religiously not the same, but culturally very much the same.
Yeah.
That's probably true. Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have that with what's happening in Israel and Palestine as much, although, these are groups that have been living side by side, mostly peacefully for some generations, and now sadly not. I think that both the Israelis have committed war crimes. I think Hamas has committed war crimes as well. There are victims and perpetrators on either side of the conflict. And the sad thing is, it would be really, I think, pretty easy just to say, can't we give peace a chance? Like the old John Lennon song. And that would be a wonderful thing. Maybe it's too optimistic, or I've got rose-colored glasses on, but at some point, if we're going to live in a world where we don't judge anyone by their religion or what part of the globe they just happen to be born into, we have to draw those lines in the sand, not about territory, but about personal imagination and how we see each other. You go up into a spacecraft and you look at the globe, and you see that the artificial lines that we've put all around it to say this is a country, this is my country, it's all a human construct. So living with that is in itself, something that we have. If we only all had what astronauts have, which is called the overview effect, that when you look down and you see the pale blue marble, the fragility of the Earth, I think, you could come away with a lot of different motivations and conclusions, even if you don't even get a chance to go up into space.
So do you think that taking a lesson from the Irish troubles, it will be better if the Palestinians and the Israelis both drank Guinness?
Yes. Yes. If you can get, the Palestinians who are Muslim, and it's of course against their religious tradition to drink alcohol, yes, maybe have everyone just sit around a hookah, a hookah, and blow off some steam that way would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I think we knew what you meant by a hookah there.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I wanted to add
Sure.
after Guy. Go ahead.
Oh well, sorry. You go ahead. I wasn't ready to just contribute really substantively then.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's important for people to distinguish between the Jewish people and the Israeli government.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is also important for people to distinguish between Hamas and the Palestinian people.
Right.
And
Yep,
I think it's
absolutely.
really easy for people to conflate those things together.
Mhm.
It's
Yes.
partially the fault of the media. It's partially the
Yes.
fault of those governments themselves that talk about the other side as though it's the people. When really, everything that was just said about, there's money in maintaining war, that's money for the governments, and so they have a vested interest in doing so. It may not be the will of the people all of the time. The people are often misled and pawns of what their government is doing. And so when you're tempted to criticize the Israeli government, that doesn't necessarily mean the Jewish people. And when you're tempted to criticize Hamas, that doesn't mean the Palestinian people either. And so I just think it's
Bravo.
fair to point that out.
Yes.
So why do we choose such extreme fundamentalist leaders?
Good point. But I mean, the interesting thing, we were talking about the cultural connections. There is quite a lot, I think, that Islam and Judaism share. They share a much closer concept of God than, say, Christians do. They also share quite a lot of dietary and other sort of things. So I think there is quite a lot of connection. And there's a very successful Muslim-Jewish forum in Greater Manchester here in the UK, where leading Muslims and leading Jews get together and they spend a lot of time socializing and dialoguing. And it works really well. And I can't help feeling that actually what they're doing could actually be repeated, in Israel and Palestine, if only, somehow the idea could take root. I mean, I know there are Israelis and Palestinians working hard together to try to do this kind of work. It's not new, but in the meantime, as you point out, the dominant rulers on each side are the sort of extremists, and it's a problem.
There's one organization in particular in Israel, and I think it's still functioning, called Jewish Voice for Peace, and it's made up of Israelis and Palestinians who are working together collectively. Some of its members are made up of the parents of children who were lost in the violence, whether it be a Hamas rocket or an Israeli brigade firing on children there. So it's very interesting because there are people who are directly suffering from the conflict who are trying to, in many cases, rise above it and see each other as, brother and sister, as humans rather than the enemy. And these are people who have suffered terribly because of the violence.
Well, I hope they gain traction.
Yeah.
So that particular story was about rockets that were launched from Lebanon. There was also rockets launched from the Gaza Strip that's acknowledged to have been due to Palestinian militants controlled by Hamas. They fired 25 rockets at Israel over the same period of time. And of course, the Israeli military carried out airstrikes in response. But this is spilling over now because two British Israeli sisters and their mother were killed in a shooting on the occupied West Bank. They were in a car. It was shot at and then it crashed. And the two sisters were killed at the accident, and their mother lingered for another couple of days in hospital and has now died. And they are actually immigrants to the area from the UK, and they moved there because their rabbi father wished to, return to Israel and, take up his role in that community. And of course,
So, am I right in thinking that they actually were living in an illegal settlement, John? I think I might have read that somewhere.
I have no information, I'm afraid.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that when the tensions rise, then there are consequences. There are consequences not only with rockets and with the demonstrators who are being sort of beaten, but also generally around the West Bank, people get angry and they start doing things like this, and like the Italian tourists as well.
Just coming on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same phenomenon, really, isn't it, John? I would have thought.
And not only that, it's not just those who are riled up by the actions going on above their heads, as it were, in the military field, but it's also innocent people who just happen to be in the way of the bullets.
Right. The collateral damage, right, Bryce? Is that what it's called in the military?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the euphemism used in the military. Innocent lives lost.
But I mean, I suppose there's a distinction between the Italian tourist, who surely must be completely innocent, and the Israelis who are actually in an illegal settlement. Because there is, and I think someone was mentioning it before, we are looking at what has been judged to be an apartheid regime here. That was recently found by, was it Amnesty International? It was one, international respected organization, looked at all the evidence over a period of several years and came to the conclusion that actually this is the same as apartheid. And apartheid is actually a war, not a war crime. It's a crime against humanity, according to an international treaty. So, it is a serious matter that and it's destabilizing for the region, but also, again, that has consequences further.
Yeah. And I should also correct myself a few moments ago, David, because you said collateral damage, but as I reflect on that more, collateral damage is a term used to apply when civilians are killed accidentally as a result of targeting what is assumed to be a military target, and then civilians just happen to get in the way, and it's like, oh well, collateral damage. When civilians are actually targeted, that's a war crime.
Yeah. Good point.
I just wanted to make that distinction.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good distinction to make. Yeah.
Okay. Well, leaving Israel behind for a little while, there's we're going to Mexico. We don't
Shalom. No kidding.
We don't often visit Mexico, but there is a system of training Catholic priests in Mexico, and one of the trainee priests is a 28-year-old Miguel Pantaleon. He spent a decade training to join the clergy, and he's finally was brought into the priesthood at a mass by the diocese bishop. And in the front pew, his mother was watching. She beamed with pride because he is the 11th of 13 children, and his achievement of priesthood is a source of great prestige for the family. However, she might be forgiven for harboring a few doubts, because more than 50 priests have been killed in Mexico since 2006, some for speaking out against violence, and others caught up in the crossfire of an unending conflict between rival criminal organizations. So it seems that being a priest these days is not the safe and
not in Mexico.
Right.
no.
Well, if he's the 11th of 15 children, clearly they're practicing Catholics.
But
Yes.
See, one of the things that I'd like to see is atheists and humanists coming out and standing in solidarity with, religious people who are being killed.
Right.
On the grounds that, in a secular society, we stand for freedom of conscience and belief and against violence. Even if we don't agree with the people, so I'd like to see in my area, for instance, if there are more communal riots, and every now and again we have tensions like many countries do, I'd like to see us sort of do something like that. Not quite sure what, but I think there's a serious issue here which we could be creative with.
Yeah, interesting.
And sometimes, sorry.
No, go ahead, Bryce.
I was going to say, just to I agree with what Guy said. I think maybe the problem is sometimes there's a rush in the atheist community, assuming that they're following this type of story at all, which they tend not to because it's religious. But if they are following, I think that there's a tendency to jump on the "where was your God now" bandwagon, and it's like that might not be the best response. That's certainly not the empathetic response. That's certainly not going to get atheists on your side. Maybe what's needed is to, instead of pointing to the failure of religion, we come together and say, how can we help to demonstrate our good?
Of course, the medical field, the professionals in the field of medicine, they treat all people as though they're just innocent humans, and irrespective of how they got their injuries, they look after them. So what Guy, I think, is saying is that we should all come out more publicly as being in support of humans.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have to remember, I think last week's show we were talking about Dan Berrigan, the priest who was anti-war.
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
And we can't forget, there were good people like Father Oscar Romero, who was murdered in El Salvador because he was speaking out against gang violence. And he was killed inside of a Catholic church, gunned down, out, on the steps of the church, for being a person of conscience. And I think that we have to support people who are trying to make their community better, regardless of their faith tradition.
Yeah, definitely.
With the caveat that we're not doing this from a position of faith. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's
So visiting America, I'm going to show you a nice little video. This woman who, you'll see what she has to say. Here we go.
The Ten Commandments are not only a sacred text in the Jewish and Christian faiths, but they're also essential to direct secular issues, or more secular issues, of just honoring one's parents, not murdering, not committing adultery, not stealing, not bearing false witness, or not being covetous. As a mom of 7, I homeschool because I see what's happening in the public schools, but it is my desire to see order and morality restored to the classrooms. It will again be a place where people can feel safe sending their children. We must restore a biblical standard to our educational system. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you think of that, eh?
Well,
she's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to restore a biblical standard of education, then you're not educating women. Look at the most extreme of the religions. Compulsory education, if it happens at all, stops at around 12 years old for girls. I mean, it's just this seems to be a very sickening trend amongst the most radical and evangelical Christians in the United States now. And personally, I think it's a last gasp, even though it's painful to live through it. But it's, you've got people who are seeing the political expedience of feeding these people by banning books, by don't say gay bills like Ron DeSantis is doing. It works great in certain places, but fortunately it doesn't work great everywhere. Because I think the majority of the people in the United States still want people to be free of this insanity.
So guess where that one was speaking from?
Probably Texas or Florida.
Florida or Texas.
No, you're right, first time Texas, and she
Yeah.
was speaking. She was speaking to their Senate, and she wants to bring the Bible standards to the. Do you know? I think we should send her a Bible with a lot of stickers in it, pointing
Right.
to the Bible standards.
Right.
So
You know, this is ridiculous because this is just another example of the Christian persecution complex where
Mhm.
they perceive themselves to be persecuted even when not. I don't know if she's aware of this, but there is such a thing called Christian schools in the United States and Catholic schools where they actually do teach the biblical standard. And guess what? Anyone can enroll their children in a Christian school or a Catholic school. What
Right.
you don't have the right to do is preach that stuff in public schools because we have
Right.
something called the First Amendment, which is that no law shall be established respecting an establishment of religion. That's the first clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution. So I don't know if she's ever read that, if she's forgotten it, but that's not a thing in public school, nor should it ever have been a thing.
Right.
No.
Well, you know, you had. I'm sorry for jumping in. It's
Okay.
not just a quote unquote red state issue. I mean, a few weeks ago, you had Mayor Eric Adams come out and make some really wild statements about there shouldn't be a separation of church and state, and the church is the heart, and you can't live without the heart, and then his staff and him double downing on this. So there's a messaging going on here. But you know, this self-flagellation in front of the public for your God is just, in my mind, incredibly distasteful, and as a civil libertarian, needs to be fought against.
We don't need the Ten Commandments. I'm sorry. I just want to say we don't need the Ten Commandments to know that we're not supposed to murder people. We already have secular laws that cover that. And I don't give a damn about covetousness or not. That's something that you can think is a sin, but I don't. I don't care. There's nothing wrong with being covetous necessarily. If you have a problem with adultery, that's between you and your spouse. We don't need to be making adultery illegal. And by the way, I don't see any of you Christian people on the right trying to make adultery illegal. I only ever hear you talk about gays and transgender people and taking women's rights away. I never heard anyone argue once that adultery should be illegal. That's never been an argument made in any court. So,
except when these preachers get caught.
Yeah,
and then they say, I sinned. I'm begging for forgiveness.
Well, the people seem to like them when they do that. But I always remember George Carlin in one of his great pieces said that coveting other people's goods is fundamental to the capitalist U.S. economy.
Yeah. It is. He's absolutely correct. I mean, it's part of what it means to be American, wanting to be better. Like that idea of the American dream, it's about being covetous. It's something. So they're in conflict with themselves. At least the people on the right who are promoting capitalism and the American dream, but also Christianity at the same time. These things are in conflict.
Staying with America, going to Wyoming, if there is a state that's in the middle, this is it, I should think. So there is an atheist there who is suing the city of Gillette for, hold on to your hats, $24,250,000 because he's claiming that the state is suppressing his religious beliefs. He's an atheist because they allow Christians to deliver most of the invocations at the city council meetings. So he's saying, Bruce Williams, his name, he's saying that the city council has about 24 meetings a year. And since a quarter of Wyoming citizens have no religion, there ought to be a quarter of those council meetings having a secular invocation. And apparently in 2017 and 2018, he was allowed to deliver two. It's not a quarter of 24, but that's what he was allowed to deliver. But since then he's been limited to only one invocation. And so his plea, and this is a court case suing, he is saying that the city refused my request for multiple invocations, and they wouldn't tell me what group was controlling those that were giving the invocations. But later on, he found out that it's an unincorporated Christian group that gets to do most of the invocations. He said, the city has been creating a mockery of my atheist beliefs through its deliberate preference for Christianity, and by either prohibiting or limiting his worship as an atheist.
Well, I mean, this kind of thing is very well known to us in the UK, because we have an established church. And although more than half of the people in the UK now say they don't have a religion, yet the coronation is going to be an intensely religious affair, with Prince Charles promising to defend either the Protestant religion or just faith in general. We're not sure yet. And in every walk of life, the Church of England and the Christians have precedence. I mean, I myself have actually done the invocation, or what's called prayers before council meetings, on 3 occasions in Greater Manchester area. But I mean, they are dominated by the religious here, and we don't have a ground to complain, as far as I can tell, unless some creative lawyers can find something in the European Convention. We're struggling, or the quality legislation. I mean, there may be grounds, but
I hope he gets his $24 million anyway.
I don't think he deserves a dime, frankly.
I can't see how he's arrived at that figure, though. I mean, what's the loss that he has suffered in financial terms?
Yeah, well, I don't think he deserves any money, but I do think it's important to raise issues like this to light, and so I'm glad he's actually brought it to light. I don't think he should be getting paid for it. I think that's a scam artist.
I tend to agree with you, Bryce. I think as a way of making it known that we're here, and if we do have to bring legal standing, we have the AHA, we have American Atheists, we have Freedom from Religion Foundation, we have a lot of secular groups, atheist groups, humanist groups that have legal arms that do this, and that's a very good thing. And so we're not there trying to overthrow Congress. We're trying to use the laws to ensure that we have an equal footing. And I think that I mean, probably if you spoke to this guy, he probably doesn't want any money, is my assumption. I could be wrong. But I don't think he'll get any, but he's definitely brought it out.
Exactly. It's a tongue-in-cheek publicity stunt, and more power to his elbow, definitely.
Yeah.
So I've got another short video to show you. Watch this one.
Finally, here also. And sir, my tongue. Thank you. Thank you.
What do you think of that? Hey,
it's not as bad as rabbis sucking the penis of babies that they've just circumcised, is it?
Right.
And given herpes too.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was rather I didn't want to see that, but I'm glad that I saw it just for the context to know. I didn't know that he actually did it. I thought it was just he asked him to do that, and that's what the controversy was. I didn't realize that he was actually compelling him to do that right there. So that is particularly disturbing, but frankly not surprising, which is unfortunate.
It just this is someone, obviously he doesn't read the newspapers because I think he would know better to. It just.
But do you need
You know,
to read the newspapers to know that that's
no, of
inappropriate?
course not, of course not. But
Yeah.
but it's just very clear that it's so out of tune with, this is a guy, until this happened, I think everyone saw as a moral signpost, for better or worse, and a man of peace. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he won the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't remember now. But I'm like you, Bryce. I thought he just asked for it to be done. I didn't know he actually did it. And
Yeah.
But it's so bad. It's just so bad.
And it makes me really wonder how people of different faiths, all different religions, look to these people, the clergy, the church leaders, their religious figures. They say that they don't venerate them, and they say that they don't worship them, but they act as though they do. They have these beliefs that these people were called by God or chosen by God. It raises the question: why is God choosing so many shitty people for I mean, that should be the first question that all of them are asking when your top leaders are doing this. The Pope, the Dalai Lama. I mean, if that's who God is choosing, then maybe he's not choosing them. Maybe he's not choosing anybody.
Right. Maybe there's no God.
I was in two minds about this. First of all, like you, I was horrified because of the infection implications, and also because of the exploitation of the young implications. The little boy was so vulnerable to suggestion. He could have been asked to do anything, and he would have done it. And this, of course, is a tradition, a tendency that is exhibited in a lot of religions. Get them while they're young, while we can fool them into, obeying our wishes. But then I looked it up, and I found that apparently in one area of wherever he comes from, where does the Dalai Lama come from? Tibet. One area of Tibet, it's a custom to share sweets with children, even to the extent of taking them out of your mouth and giving a half-eaten sweet to a child. And then apparently that this custom extends to the fact that if the children are disbelieving and they think you've got a sweet in your mouth that you're not sharing with them, then what you do is say, "Suck my tongue." That will prove that there is no sweet in your mouth. Your tongue is sweet. So is it just a
cultural thing? Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's obviously acceptable in his culture in a way that it would be suspect elsewhere.
I am anti-tradition for the sake of tradition. So if it is just a cultural thing, it's a stupid one, and it should stop. Just like all of the other ones, And so that it's not picking on that particular culture. I think all cultural behaviors that are demonstrably harmful in some way or don't have any visible value added, don't have any obvious benefit, should probably go away. And we probably shouldn't just be doing things for the sake of tradition.
No. Tradition is a very bad reason for doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. I mean, if we're too culturally relativistic, then we allow for clitoridectomy. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't do that. And at the same time, if we're saying people shouldn't be circumcised because there's no reason for it, actually, then you can't allow the Catholic Church to move around priests, and you can't when someone shows themselves to do something like this with children in public, not hold them to modern standards of account.
And I should say that there is a bit of hypocrisy in the United States. You just mentioned circumcision. We're obviously very much against female genital mutilation in this country. It's for the most part, most of the developed world recognizes that as a violation of human rights.
Right.
We're still stuck on circumcision in the United States, unfortunately.
Right.
Even outside of a religious context. So that's something that people need to wake up to, and that's a tradition that needs to go away.
And it's done for the same reason, to take away nerve endings from the body, to make sex feel good. I mean,
I don't think that people consciously do it for that reason. I think they just do it because it was done. It's just the tradition.
Well, it's tradition.
What they're used to seeing, and they don't. It's a lot of it is just ignorance, and they're just doing it because it's been done. But the original.
If the tradition was to cut off everyone's right ear, we'd see it as stupid, wouldn't we?
Well, we judge when we look at tribes in South America and Africa that do these strange things to their bodies. It's normal in their culture to do that. But we look at it and we're like, why would you do that to themselves? Well, it's the same thing, you know?
Right, exactly.
So. Absolutely. Guys, you've been every bit as wonderful and erudite and wise and witty as I expected. Thank you very much. Take the rest of the day off.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carrying drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that?